cardboard box suddenly tore open. The sound of frozen meat falling just covered the manager's door. Closing noise, that was how the girl, Mili, got locked inside the storage freezer at minus 18 degrees Celsius. She didn't realize it at all. Not until the manager turned off all the store's lights. Mili then sensed the danger. She quickly stood up and knocked on the heavy door. In panic, she switched on the freezer lights, but her heart never lit up again. The manager kept answering phone calls and never noticed any other sound. When he left the mall, his phone call still hadn't ended. Mili searched for her phone in a hurry, but unfortunately, it was left on the counter in the store. Facing the freezing cold storage, Mili felt desperate. She had no idea what to do next, but she didn't give up. She found a cart and rammed it against the door. No matter how hard she hit it, the door stayed shut. Her hands, however, became bruised and torn as the temperature kept dropping. Mili rubbed her palms again and again, hoping to gain the tiniest bit of warmth. By accident, she touched a movie ticket in her pocket. She looked at her watch. The last show was almost over. She grabbed a tray, hurried to the door and stared at her watch without blinking. When the time came, she pounded the tray desperately against the door. Just then, crowd leaving the theater passed by the store, but everyone was busy talking about the movie and what to eat for supper. No one heard Mili's cries for help. When the crowd was gone, a little boy passed by. He heard the knocking and told his father. But as the father put down his phone and came over, the tray slipped from Mili's hands. She was already too frozen to fight anymore. Her only chance was gone one by one. The mall lights went out. Mili was completely trapped inside the freezer. Her watch cracked from the cold. Without time, her heart felt even more lost. Worse still, her nose started bleeding from the freezing air. At this rate, she wouldn't last much longer. Terrified, she curled up in the corner. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how long she could survive. Soon her palms froze and frost slowly crept up her arms. Mili forced herself to stay strong. She took off her earrings, pulled out a thin shirt from her bag, ripped it in half and taped the cloth around her hands and feet. But it was far from enough. Her toes cracked from the cold. She could only curl up tighter. She had no idea how much time passed. In a daze, she realized all the freezing air came from the two fans inside the freezer. She gathered her courage again, dragged a box over and tore it into two square pieces of cardboard. Dragging her injured body, she climbed the ladder. The icy wind cut her face like knives. She stood on tiptoe, shaking as she pressed the cardboard over a fan, then carefully taped it in place. One wrong move and she could fall. Just as she finished covering the second fan, the first piece blew off. Mili crawled back toward it, but her foot slipped. She fell heavily to the ground. Luckily, Mili dodged fast enough, but unfortunately, her right foot was crushed and broken in this freezing place. That injury made things even worse. So Mili made a bold decision. She slowly placed her foot between two shelves. Carefully, she slid a piece of cardboard from the side. She held her breath with one hard bite of her teeth. Her broken foot was forced back into place. She endured both the cold and the pain. She wrapped her foot with cloth, put cardboard against her ankle and tied it tight with tape. Now the broken ankle could at least take a little weight. Mili tried to find food for strength. The fries that were soft before were now as hard as rocks. She had no choice but to curl up against the wall, waiting for whatever fate would bring. Suddenly, Mili saw a mouse nearby. She wasn't afraid. Instead, she grabbed the box under the mouse's feet. Inside was a piece of chocolate. She quickly ate it. Only by gaining energy could she fight for more chances of rescue. Watching the mouse search for food too, Mili broke off a small piece and tossed it to the mouse. After all, they were sharing the same cruel fate. By now, the freezer temperature had dropped to minus 16 degrees. If she couldn't find a solution, she would surely freeze to death here. Then Mili remembered the lighter in her bag. She began burning whatever she could find for warmth. Even her Canadian visa application papers. It meant she was willing to give up her dreams just to survive. Sure enough, the freezer's temperature began to rise. The mouse came closer, enjoying the warmth. But soon, thick smoke filled the room. Mili coughed hard, choking on the fumes. She realized she might die from smoke before the cold. She quickly grabbed a piece of cardboard and smothered the flames. That was when she noticed a half-burned paper. On it was a drawing of a warm fortress. Suddenly she had an idea, dragging her injured body. She used boxes and plastic frames to build a small shelter. She placed a cardboard sheet on top and even let the mouse inside. Hiding there, maybe things wouldn't feel as terrifying. The freezing air couldn't be kept out. Everything around her was still ice cold. She had no idea how long she stayed like that. When Mili woke up again, she found her arm had slipped off the cardboard and was frozen tight to the floor. She had no time to think. The longer she waited, the harder it would stick. So she gritted her teeth, yanked her arm upward and screamed in pain. The mouse had already frozen to death after so long without moving. Every motion doubled her pain. Her skin cracked from the cold. She didn't know how much longer she could hold on. At that moment, Mili looked up at the fans again. She dragged over a steel pipe, shakily pushed it into the vent and pressed down. With all her strength, she tried to pry off the cover. After countless tries, she finally managed to pull the lid off. Now if she could just stop the fan from spinning, the freezing air would slow down. He gripped the steel pipe with both hands, but clearly this method didn't work. By then, the freezer's temperature had dropped to minus 17 degrees. If she didn't find another way, Mili would freeze to death. She sat down first. She wrapped her frostbitten arm with plastic wrap. Then she simply wrapped her whole body in it. In her left hand, she held a piece of frozen meat. Staring firmly at the ruthless fan, at that moment, Mili looked like a warrior who had awakened. She threw the frozen meat at the spinning blades. She missed, so she tried again, after throwing many times. Her eyes grew sharper, more determined. Finally, she used all her strength and hurled the meat straight at the fan. This time, her confidence made her succeed. The icy wind still cut through her body, but hope quietly burned inside her. To make sure the fan wouldn't spin again, she stuffed in more frozen meat. Now only one fan was left. If she could stop it too, maybe she still had a chance to live. But her strength was nearly gone. She missed her throws, then collapsed weakly to the ground. By then, her skin had turned purple and cracked from the cold. With her last bit of strength, she shakily tapped on the wall. Unexpectedly, her hand touched a screw. Mili pulled out a hairpin, curiously twisted the screw and removed the cover. It turned out to be an escape hatch, but she no longer had the strength to crawl through it. Instead, she picked up a tray and tapped twice inside the opening. At that moment, Mili's father, who was anxiously searching, just happened to walk by. He heard the sound and rushed to open the fire hydrant door. He wouldn't ignore even the smallest clue. From the outside, it only looked like a fire hydrant. He was about to leave, but just then, Mili collapsed completely. The tray slipped from her hand and clattered loudly to the floor. Sound pulled the father back. Anxiety told him every second mattered. Mili lay on the freezing floor, eyes closed, and just then, her father finally found her. Mili was rescued at last.